Now let's look at the second part of this week's content, which is studying ethics in the context of privacy. That's the course. So what is ethics, right? If you just consider the broader definition of what ethics is, it is just being, so to say, reasonably appropriate in terms of doing some things, right? Ethically, and you would have heard this word, be ethical when you're doing some things, right? So that's what we're going to study. Ethics in the context of course is going to be how to design studies to collect data, how to analyze data, what data to collect in terms of privacy studies, what are the methods to get your study approved, and information connected to that. That's what we're going to be studying in this section of the course. Why study ethics? I think it's critical because as we always know, right? Many of the studies, many of the data that we collect for analysis of privacy is actually going to have personally identifiable information. If you think about doing a user study on how people use browser extensions, or what all websites do people access while making a purchase, you're going to get some level of personal details in that, right? You're going to get what products they're buying, what time they're actually going to those websites, all these kinds of information, which could potentially be used against them, or which is potentially identifiable to that user also. Given that the studies are all about in the context of privacy, is personally identifiable information, sensitive information, all that, it is very, very necessary for administrators, researchers, whoever is conducting the study to know the ethical part of conducting these studies. One of the key component of ethics would be this institutional review board, particularly in the academic setting. I think this is all of that we will be talking about is in the academic setting. Because companies can collect data, companies are collecting data and they are using it. There's meaning they have fair information practices and other controls over it. But our focus on this course would be at the academic level, because most of you would be students, most of you would be conducting these studies in academic settings. That's what we'll focus on. Institutional Review Board, or it's also called as Ethics Committee in some contexts, some universities, right? Institutional Review Board is a requirement now, more and more now. Organization, academic settings, academic publications are making it mandatory for studies to get the RB approval, ethics committee clearance, so that the studies could be done ethically. Why do we need it? These are basically checks and balances, right? Because otherwise, I'll show you some examples where studies have been done before the IRB's creation and all, where there's a lot of misbehavior has happened, the data has been misused, all of that. This is one of the classical example in terms of whenever ethics in studies are discussed. This was conducted in 1971 at Stanford University. The study was simple, right? The study was that they took 24 undergrads and they said that, okay, half of you behave like a prisoner, half of you behave like make guards, and they said that they put the setting saying that, okay, let's understand the behavior of this prisoners and guards in a particular context, right? So randomly assign participants as guards, as prisoners, arrested prisoners at home, just to set the study in that mode. 24 UGs in the basement of a building. What came out after this study was set up was what created a big uproar. You can see the images, right? You can see images of physical abuse, sexual humiliation, getting people to not to go to sleep, and torturing them, or authoritarian and a draconian behavior of the guards happen. Interestingly, half the time, meaning that the study also is designed in a way that after some period, the roles switched. The guards became the prisoners, and the prisoners became the guards. The behavior continued. Right. So again, you can think of here there is no personal information, as I motivated that IRB is necessary or ethical clearance is necessary. But this is abuse to people, right? One of the ways by which, one of the studies that actually motivated thinking about control or experiments that are done. Okay, very popularly called as the Stanford prison experiment. Meaning, it looks like there is a placard in the Stanford University which says there's a site of the Stanford prison experiment in 1971. It's that popular. So if you just look up Stanford experiment, you will see lots and lots of references to this study, and how influential this study was in thinking about the Institutional Review Board. Here is another experiment which is also extremely popular in terms of showing the power of users, right? So this study was conducted in 1961 in Yale University. So this is an experimenter, this is a teacher, this is a learner. Experimenter, teacher, learner. So the experiment, the way it was set up was, teacher would ask a question, and if the learner didn't perform, answer correctly, the teacher had the control of giving the voltage to the learner. That's how it is set up. So if you see here, it is set up so that the learner could actually get shock. And as the learner made mistakes, the teacher can increase the voltage, decrease the voltage, all of that was going on. Again, this is to show that how much power the teacher had over the learner was what the study was interested, the researchers were interested in studying. At some point, the 65% of the participants, 65% of the teachers went to actually give about 450 volts to the learners, which is very high. And in reality, the learners did not get the shock. It was the learner was making noise as though he or she was getting the shock, but never got the shock. Again, very popularly called as Milgram experiment. Feel free to look it up, and if you have any questions about the study, about context, everything, I'm happy to explain something more in detail also. But for now, this experiment is a way by which participants got shock, which they didn't. Learner thought that he or she was giving shock to the teacher thought that he or she was giving shock to the learner, but the learner did not get the shock. But it showed that how much of authority that the teacher thought that he or she had over learner. Again, an experiment to show how users, without knowledge also, the other part of the study is also the deception part. I have seen very commonly students doing studies give these kind of details out, which is we collected data, and my friend Shiva said this. When we are looking at project reviews, even in the reports that they would write, Shiva said this would be there. That's revealing the participant, right? Put the screenshot of a conversation on email, chat, and presentation without anonymizing or suppressing, blackening the name or email address. For example, you would have had some conversation. You would see some, let's take a tweet or a Facebook update from one of your friend, which you wanted to use it as motivational for point that you want to get across. You'll take a screenshot and put it without actually anonymizing it. And particularly if there is sensitive information, you really want to make sure that you don't reveal that information. Right. As much as possible, try and avoid using this information itself, using the screenshot itself. If it is necessary, please anonymize it. So now let's look at what is institutional review board. What is the application? What is the consent form? How do you build the consent form? What should be in the consent form? What's the proposal that you should write? What is a flyer that you should submit with the IRB application for getting it approved? So I've done many studies with IRB. I currently also have studies in which IRB approval is needed. This takes some time, and all institutions, whichever institute you are part of, please go check if your institute has an IRB approval. Even that itself would be an interesting data for me to also look at, which is please go ask your institute whether they have institutional review board or ethics clearance committee, and post it on mailing list saying that institution name yes or a no for the IRB. You will also understand, right, how the institutes look at these problems. Okay, and IRB is only a floor, which is that IRB only looks at the minimum requirement of doing the studies, right? You should be able to do more protection to the data that you're collecting. You should be more careful in terms of data that you're collecting and protect the data that you're collecting. Okay, let's look at IRB applications. So this is all of the content from now till the end of the IRB documents is all documents that I've used in my own studies. So I'm happy. I prepared it myself, so I'm happy to actually explain it in detail also if there's anything particular that you want to know. So this is a flyer. This is a flyer to show the how we did the study and how. So these are information that was given for participants to understand what the study is and sign up for the study. So the application goes with the proposal. The application goes with the consent form. The application goes with some more details about the study. Right? So the proposal is generally giving the details of what the study is. And there are some sections of the proposal that I will go through. This study was about how people were using emails and in terms of how they were actually reacting to phishing emails for the study, right? So just the details about the proposal itself, technical details about the proposal if you want to look at it. This study investigates why people fall for phishing scams, as well as how effective various interventions are at educating people about these scams. Just general details about the study, and then walking through the details in the email itself. The details is not relevant to this class. That's why I'm not getting into details of the proposal itself. But the sections are very important for this class. Around 20 people in and around CMU and UPIT will be interviewed for this study. So this is again details of how the subjects will be recruited. In your case, probably you could. So again, this is connecting to probably the projects that I said you should try as part of this course. Please consider actually doing some data collection of human subjects. In the process, you will actually understand how to set up this IRB approval, everything. So this is about if you're doing an online study, you will say that, look, I would use this SurveyMonkey, or I would use portals where I would get users to sign up and I would send out emails. I would post on Twitter. I will post on Facebook to recruit participants. This is one of the critical thing that the IRB so what is IRB reviewer side also, right? It's going to be for example in triple IT, it is going to be faculty who are who understand these kind of ethical ideas, ethical concepts. They are going to be part of the committee who is going to approve the study. It can have external faculty or researchers are also part of the committee, but it's an announced committee, which is a set of faculty who will look at the application and approve it. And of course, there's discussion also which goes on if they need any clarification. I've done some IRB applications where it goes back and forth with the committee and the research group to answer questions, and then the IRB actually reviews it because they need more details if needed. Confidentiality is something very critical that the IRB is going to look at, which is to say that, okay, once the data is collected, how are you going to protect it? Who's going to get access to it? How long will you actually keep this data? All of that information is presented here. So just to get some details. During the interview, no personally identifiable information like this would be collected. Only anonymized members, authorized members of the research group will have access to the audio files and transcripts. Because this was an interview study, audio files who would get access to is what is mentioned here. Right. So it's very detailed because it should actually give the IRB committee to have all the details for approval. So essentially, this is to say that the pre-study and the post is every study most of the times will have a pre-component, which is collecting, let's take demographics of the user, collecting some information about the user. The study itself will happen. In this case, how people react to phishing emails was there. Pre would be getting the demographics of the study of the users. Post would be looking at how telling the users that what happened and what we were trying to study, all that. It's extremely also important to do this post study, not just debriefing. Debriefing is most about what happened in the study. Also, post component can also collect data from the users, right? Now that you've done the study, tell us what do you think about phishing emails, right? Would you still continue clicking on phishing emails as you did in the study? These kind of questions could be asked in the post study to get to know what the participants are thinking about. That's what a post component of a study is. Officials authorizing access to the subjects. Subjects will be recruited from general population of Pittsburgh, living in and around CMU and UPIT who are non-technical, and also some group of students from CMU and UPIT will be recruited, right? So this is basically telling the details about participants again. The risk is another one that, so confidentiality, as I said, and the risk is another one that the committee is going to look at. What level of risk is this, right? Why is this important? Because just for our online studies, you could say that, look, risk is very minimal in this. They're going to come, look at some emails, do some reply to the emails, click on the links if necessary, and then move on. But just think about it if it was a medical study, right? If you're actually a drug discovery study, right? If you have to actually give the participant a medicine and then come back and look at, or stay with them for a few hours, look at the after effects of the study, or come back and look at the effect of the medicine after a month or so. So those kind of studies will have higher risk, right? So that's why risk is a key component in which minimal risk is what they would look for. Minimal, medium, high risk is what IRB will look at. What level of risk is it? Accordingly, they would actually look at the application. So in this case, the context that we have put is there's no foreseeable physical or psychological risk of the subjects. The specific objective of the user study is to understand how people make use of emails and see if they read the security announcements. The study will also teach the subjects how not to fall for different security attacks. The findings will identify different methods, blah, blah, blah. So just to say that, look, there is not much risk in this study that participants are signing up for. More details about subject recruitment, how subject would be recruited. So another component, so one is the confidentiality risk, and then another key component that IRB is going to look for, what are the kinds of questions that you're going to ask the participants. So as I said, pre-experiment questions, which is on average, how many total emails do you receive per day on a scale of 1 to 7? Not likely, 7 is most likely. How likely do you to reply? These are all questions that you would ask before they do the study. And after the study, if they didn't understand the cues or information provided, ask why. Let's take in the study, you showed them something and you realize that they could have got it, they did not get it. You could make a note of it and then talk to them after the study saying why they did not understand it. Two important components that IRB is going to look at in addition to confidentiality that I said is this the only way by which data can be collected? This question would IRB would repeat for every single study. Is this the way that is this the only way that the data could be collected? Can you do the study without actually interacting with human subjects? If so, please do that approach is what IRB's request would be. And the risk level, as I said, minimal, high risk is what they would look for. Consent form, I'll actually walk you through the consent form in a second. Human subjects clearance request, again I'll show you in the deck of slides. So this is basically online tutorial content that you'll have to go through to get certified that you are aware of how to do the studies with human subjects. And I've actually summarized this deck, summarized the content in few points. We could actually look at that, but I would highly recommend you to go look at the content and get this certified. Also, if you do it, please post it on again on mailing list. It's just about a 90 minutes video that you'll have to look for and answer some questions depending on I think there is also not right or wrong answers. The test is about have you understood the content. That's all. So here is an example of the consent form. The consent form is, I'm sure you would have been part of studies. I'm hoping that some of you would have participated in studies where you signed up for such consent form. I think even if you go to a restaurant now where they have this huge burgers for the entire family to eat, they get a consent form signed that's saying that, look, we are not taking any responsible if anything happens to our health after this, blah blah blah, all that. That's the consent form that I'm talking about. So this consent form is walking you through the same study in terms of email phishing study. It talks about purpose of the study, interview procedure, which is you'll come into the lab, we'll ask you questions, all that. Compensation, what you'll get paid, risk and discomfort, and cost, research benefits, risk, as I said, minimal risk, high risk. What is the risk for being participating in the study? Research benefits, what are the benefits of the study if you participate? And if as researchers we are able to understand what happens, it will help the society. That's the argument we'll make. Right is by no means should you feel forced to participate in this interview, meaning nobody is getting forced into being participant in a study, right? And you can withdraw your consent and stop participating in the interview now or any time in the middle of the study also. Confidentiality that I've already said. In the application you say what all you're going to do. Generally consent form is like about a page or a page and a half where you're just summarizing everything for the user and the user actually signs here, right? Participant actually signs here, and this is here would be a IRB seal. Today it could all be in digital, but IRB approval seal would be there, and you actually present this to the users and users sign it. And if you see here, I can understand, I understand that by giving my consent, I give so-and-so, that's my PhD thesis advisor, under associate's permission to present this work or return or and or other forms for teaching presentation, so that I can use it in this kind of a training material, right? I'm using this content in the training material for this course. Contact information, if you have any questions about the study, feel free to ask, feel free to call, all that. Okay, so that's about the consent form. This is just about a one-page consent form. In online form, you can just embed this into the study, and people click I agree. You use that as your approval for the subjects, and get them be part of the study. Right, so that's about consent form. Here's a actual application form itself for the IRB application. First was proposal, first was flyer, then was proposal, then was consent form. Now we have the application. Application is just going into very details of the application, not necessarily in the paragraph format, but in the format that they have set up. Every institute has their own format which they've used. This is the format that CMU used for the study that I had done. So asking you for details of the study, period, who's involved, who's the PI, small description of the study itself, and then details of what is the age of the group, participants, how many participants, generally looking for equal balance between male and female. What kind of participants would you get, where the participants would come from, all of these kind of details. I'm going to share this document also as part of this course for you. It will be on the website. Feel free to take a look at it. But the form generally looks for this details of the study, risk, how will you recruit the participants, how will you use the data that you're collecting, all that. And then, as I said before, even this, right, in a clinical study, will a placebo or a placebo procedure be used in the study? This form is generic, right? This form is not generally, this form is not only for the computer science department or the IT kind of study. This form is general for anybody in an institute, and therefore it also talks about the medical questions. So this is the one that I said before, which is minimal, greater than minimal risk and high risk. Depending on that, the details of the review will happen. Minimal risk, not much of data is getting collected, not much of concern to the participants. It's okay to do the study. And please keep in mind, these days the conferences, journals are making it mandatory. Many of them ask this review explicitly while the paper is getting accepted, who are the investigators in the study. So that's about the whole IRB applications. As I said, I'll make this document also public for all of you to access, and it'll help you to go through what is needed for setting up this IRB approval. What is IRB approval looking for? There is meaning, as I said before, they're looking for is this the only way to collect information? What protection is giving to the information that is collected? Is there any implications of data beyond the study? Because I think one component, keeping our understanding of the AOL, Netflix, right, all these data that has been made public, and the identifiability of the data that has happened after that. You also want to make sure that when you collect this data, when you have going to put the data also public, make sure that the data doesn't get de-identified, all of that. Here's another study that which is more like the phishing study itself, which had some kind of after effect because of some connections that they made in terms of the study. So this was a study done at Indiana University. Right? Indiana University. So what they did was, in short, again, please go look at the study if you're interested. But in short, they collected some publicly available information, connected it to, put the data together, and connected it to the Indiana University data of students, staff, and faculty, and then they figured out who's connected to whom, and then they sent out, as part of the study, as part of the phishing study, when they sent out the email, instead of the email coming from somebody from Indiana, they made this email coming from a person that they would actually know, right? They are connected with. The paper is called Social Phishing. Feel free to look at the paper if you're interested in it. So this one, think about it, right? If you're going to get a phishing email, so it is coming from somebody from your institute, is okay. But somebody whom you're connected with, somebody whom you think that you have more stronger edges because they found that it was part of your social interactions, is what the study did. There was a lot of after effect for the study, unethical. People thought that the study was unethical, illegal, fraudulent. Some effects on the researchers also. People denied that they fell for this kind of phishing attacks because the email was more targeted. The goal for the researchers was social phishing is more effective than normal phishing. Right. Spear phishing is a word which is targeted, but social phishing is even more targeted, which is to pick up the relationship with people and then use it for sending the phishing emails. So 1960s, 1970s, I showed about Stanford and Milgram, and then Indiana University is probably around 2003, 4, 5. This one, a few more examples at the university level, because one question you could ask, which I think I get asked multiple times, is that when you think about all this stuff, what happens to the researcher? Who gets the problem, right? These kind of experiments goes into a mess. What kind of effects can it have, right? Paper getting rejected is there. Paper not going through a conference is definitely at a research level. But here are some examples of the institute level. U.S. Office for Human Resources Protection suspended all research at John Hopkins University after one research participant died. All of this is public. You can take a look at them. In 1999, federal regulators temporarily stopped research at Duke University for volunteer safety. There was some safety issue with the participants who took the study, and therefore Duke University's research was completely shut. University of Pennsylvania, 18-year-old died in September 1999 from drugs administrators as part of the gene therapy study. And the gene therapy study was stopped after this, and the university also had trouble taking up these kind of research in future. Right. So I think the effect can happen on researcher, faculty, paper getting not accepted. It could happen at an institute level where institutes funding are getting stopped. So next few slides is, I hope everything is clear until now. If you want to take a pause in the video, pause the video and take a assimilate the content that you've gotten until now for this ethics part. So what I did was, this is part of the principles of research with human subjects. This is basic content. When you do the 90-minute or the video that I have later in the slide, you will understand the importance of how to take care of human subjects. A few high-level principles are respect for persons. I think these are very philosophical in some sense. That's why I said that having that clearance for the IRB would really help you to respect human subjects. I'm sure all of you respect people and take care of subjects otherwise also. This is only a requirement in the IRB that this certificate is needs to be presented. Individuals have autonomy. People cannot be used as a means to an end. Philosophical, provide protection to the vulnerable, provide informed consent and privacy. Beneficence, kindness beyond duty. Basically, it's arguing that be kind to the participants, right? Please, meaning there have been incidences where participants would show up in a study and they would actually feel bad, cry, think that something went wrong, and you really have to respect them and allow them to probably sign off the study if needed and take care of the compensation if needed, and then let them go. And be fair also. I think that's also an important thing. Be fair in terms of selection of the participants, which is male, female. If you're doing studies where other types of fairness is needed, please consider that. And also share equitably the burdens and the benefits. This is again keeping the participants in mind, feel obliged to take care of the participants in general. That's philosophical. How does this translate? Right? The three aspects that we said: respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. If you translate that into actionable items for us to do, it is basically informed consent, assessment of the risk, which is minimal and maximal, a fair selection of participants. That's a translation. If you really look at how you can use it, those are three things that you should keep in mind. That's the link to the online tutorial that I said. It'll be super nice if some of you can go take a look at the content and have the certificate also. I also had a question to all of you, which is work we have seen where IRB would have been necessary. Some of the research that we have already seen, papers that we have seen, it'll be nice if you can think about what studies have the IRB necessary, and what where all IRB was necessary as part of the content that we have already seen. And please post it in the class. Please post it in the class mailing list of which studies you think IRB was required, IRB needs to be done. Here's the last part of this ethics for our course, which is conducting ethical yet realistic usable security studies. There's also a paper written on how to do this. We'll go through this paper very quickly. So this is the paper talking about what are the important aspects of how to conduct the studies. This paper is emphasizing the points that I've said already. I've taken it from IRB applications and everything. Feel free to read the paper in full, but here is some important aspects of the paper that is relevant. Requires users to act naturally. One of the important thing of doing the study ethically is to getting the environment natural to the study, to the realistic environment that you want to keep, right? You want to study people accessing emails when they are actually on a train, when they are moving. It would be very nice to set up a study where you collect data in the similar scenario as in the real world, as close as possible. I'm sure you cannot do all the data collections as always as you need, but try and do as close as possible wherever appropriate. Right. Studies and management. Users might act more cautiously in an unfamiliar environment. On the other hand, if the study takes place in the university's computers lab, they might be less cautious since they trust the university conducting the experiment, especially if there's an experimenter next to them. Right. So arguing that set it up in a way where the participants feel more comfortable. Fairness. I think fairness is becoming more and more important. I think there is also fair principles that people are writing about in research papers. Go take a look at it, or later at some point in time we can talk about it. Fair principles, how the data should be made public, what is the necessity of making the data public, all of that. But this fairness is about fairness and bias in terms of selection of the participants, which I already mentioned about gender distribution, the probably educational distribution that you want to keep. All that you have to keep in mind while selecting the participants for the study, because otherwise the results are also going to be biased, right? You want to study how people, and you also want to keep in mind that the distribution that you're selecting, having in the study, also is very closer to the distribution that is otherwise in the population. If you've taken statistics class, it could be said as n and n, population and sample. Have the sample as close to the distribution of the population. Sometimes it's hard, but try as much as possible that you can get it. As a responsibility, researchers have a responsibility to know how to conduct research ethically, right? That's what I was trying to get across in these deck of slides, to show you that what is the importance of data collection, how you can actually keep in mind all this ethics part while collecting data. Okay, with that we'll stop the week 5 content. Again, to summarize, week 5 we had first part, we studied cookies and what is the effect of cookies, why cookies are important, what are the negative effects of cookies that are happening today, how can you actually analyze these cookies. And then the second part was about ethics in terms of conducting studies. Why do we need institutional review board, what are the nuts and bolts of doing the study, and some examples of studies which has gone wrong. And I'm going to expect you to post about the studies that we have seen in the class where IRB may have been required. Thanks again for listening to the week 5 class.